Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today we've got a special guest, Matteo. He's the CEO of FluidTokens. They're doing a lot of interesting stuff in the Ordinals and stamps space, in the Bitcoin world and the Cardano world, which we're going to get into. So welcome to the show, Matteo.
Thank you, Alex. Happy to be here.
I guess I'd love a little introduction of your backgrounds. A lot of people have got interesting backgrounds in the tech space in general that draws them into crypto, but particularly with the choice of building out fluid tokens on Cardano. And I know we'll probably get into UTXOs and the differences with stamps and ordinals, but yeah, give us a bit of that background and what led you to where you are now.
Sure. So yes, I've been in the crypto space since 2017 as an active developer. Before as a passive investor, I say, and I've been working for several projects in the years that are all crypto related and pretty important as well. 2 years ago, I had an idea with my co-founder, which is my CTO as well of FluidTokens, to start creating some DeFi protocols on UTXO based blockchain, do something interesting and good for the community. And so in the full bear market, we started developing without investments or any sort of things, just as developing free tokens as an ecosystem of the DeFi protocol. And we were very active and we still are on Cardano as a blockchain. So we started creating the first DeFi protocols there. But the cool thing is that Cardano is a UTXO blockchain, very similar from the technical point of view to Bitcoin. And in this year, in February, we started to think about Bitcoin, how we could help there. And so we started developing DeFi protocols on Bitcoin main layer, so layer one. And last week we released the DEX, so the first ever actual DEX on Bitcoin, so no centralized parties. But at the same time, we know that the layer one doesn't scale well because, of course, it has not been made for more advanced use like DeFi.
Yeah.
So what we're building now with other companies as well is a new layer two that is still UTXO based that we call Photon.
Fantastic. So I've just shown those on screen for viewers at home, the Fluid Tokens websites, and I'll link everything down below in the description bars. But yeah, you've got it up and running, which is great to see. So for people at home, a bit of the history maybe, and I'll get your take on all of this. We started to see, the NFT space, and even before we had that big run a couple of years ago, there were old Ethereum and even Bitcoin-based things that you can, I guess, inscribe into the optional data of the Bitcoin blockchain. And so that's how we came about with the ordinals. And then people said, well, maybe the better way to doing it is stamps and using it, including in the UTXOs, which can't be pruned off, which is a thing, I guess, that maybe miners could do. And people are talking about the immutability of that. So, yeah, what's your take on how tokens, the history of it, how it's best done, and what you see, I guess, going forward on the Bitcoin blockchain?
Well, yes. So I come from Ethereum, right? Because I'm a developer, so I used to develop DeFi on Ethereum. Then I moved to Cardano full time, and there you have more functionality because those blockchains have been made with the idea of supporting this kind of custom tokens, right? RC20 or whatever standard on Ethereum, and on Cardano you have native tokens, which are directly different tokens on the main chain, right? On Bitcoin we have different meta protocols, so different standards that allow you to basically create these. But the problem is that the code, the architecture of Bitcoin has not been made to support directly them. So there are trade-offs, and there are sometimes moving those tokens is also dangerous. You could lose them, accidentally spend them as Bitcoin, as Satoshis instead of actual, ordinal rules, etc.
Yeah.
So it's the best solution we have until now. These standards are the best alternatives we have now with what Bitcoin supports. But they have some limitations because, for example, the nodes don't validate the metadata, right? So it's kind of more delicate, so we need to be very careful. And now that we're building DeFi that use ordinals, that use runes, we as a developer have to be super careful about how to manage those, because you don't have to mix your runes, your ordinals with your normal Bitcoins. Otherwise, you accidentally spend them, you lose them, etc.
Yes. Do you want to maybe explain that in a little bit more detail for people at home in terms of how these tokens are attached to certain Satoshis is maybe an easy way for people to think about it, little bits of their Bitcoin, and then if they accidentally just go to send some Bitcoin, they might accidentally have a unique token attached to that, or how would you explain it for those people at home that are trying to get their heads around it best?
Well, yes. So each standard that we have, being Ordinals, BRC20, runes, etc., and new ones are also coming out. From what I understood, they're still being created, right? New versions at least. Yeah. And so the whole idea, the main idea, is that you attach some metadata in a certain transaction that you do, and that allows. So there is a field in the transaction where you can specify data, right? And this field was not originally made for that. We just understood that we could leverage it to put some custom data inside. So there is a limitation of size, etc. And there is a standard. So the content of that field is parsed in a certain way depending on the standard, right? So it's written there, and at that point from that transaction, you have some satoshis that contain that data. They are attached to that data. And if you accidentally spend them, you may end up losing them. Or if you spend them as normal Satoshis, you are spending Bitcoin only, right? Yeah. Which is not ideal because, of course, most of the ordinals, most of the runes are worth more than a single Satoshi. Yeah. So we need to be careful in this, right? And so yes, more or less, this is how it works. There is a transaction that inscribes the metadata on a certain UTXO, which is the input that points to your wallet that contains that token, so that Satoshis in this case. And then from there, you have to manage it. Some wallets on the Bitcoin ecosystem already have a good management. For example, Xverse is a very good interface where it has an address for Bitcoin, an address for runes or ordinals. So they are separated, easy to manage and not to mix. Some other wallets that are more traditional don't yet support a good interface where you actually have two different, for example, addresses. Yeah. And it becomes more tricky not to mess up things, honestly. So yeah, from our code, a big bunch of the code is about understanding which wallet you have and being sure that we're doing the correct thing, not to mix your ordinals runes or BRC20.
Yes. I might take you to talk a little bit more about the Cardano ecosystem, because it's certainly one we've touched on and we try to cover as much as we can. But in the past few years, it's just the explosion in crypto, Ethereum and DeFi, and that space was a big focus of ours. And now, particularly with DeFi on Bitcoin exploding, that's been, I guess, our main focus. It's almost impossible to keep across everything that's happening on Solana, everything that's happening on Cardano. So do you want to maybe talk about the positives and negatives, or anything interesting you found about working the Cardano? Because that is one ecosystem that I haven't spent anywhere near as much time in as Ethereum and Bitcoin.
Well, as every blockchain, it has many pros and some cons, of course. What Cardano is very distinguished by the other blockchains is the fact that it actually tries to follow the original philosophy of blockchains as Bitcoin does. So the main priority is decentralization, fairness, and access to financial services as well to the people in a democratic way. I started there because of the philosophy. I truly believe in this one. This is why I'm a Bitcoin and Cardano supporter. I work there. I try to make things there because I strongly believe in this. And so Cardano has this approach. Has an ecosystem of very, very talented developers. So there are very, very smart minds that are working actively on projects on Cardano. And we are not the only ones. There are several other DeFi and non-DeFi projects. And there are some. Cardano always had some innovative features. One of them, for example, was the liquid staking. It was the main chain that had it much before Ethereum adopted any staking, and other blockchain that followed. Yeah. So, which is important because it gives you much more freedom with your money that you delegate for securing the network and getting the rewards. And of course, there is also this different approach because Cardano, as Bitcoin, is UTXO based, so it has a type of architecture that is totally different from the account model of Ethereum or similar. And so the approach to the coding is different, but there are some use cases where the UTXO based model is much more fit for high level of parallelization or ZK proof creation and similar stuff like this. So it's definitely, we have two different models, and in technology normally there are always two alternatives, main alternatives. At the end, the convergence of the things always lead to alternatives, right? And in this case is the account model and the UTXO model that are the main ones, because Bitcoin is there and is UTXO based, and Ethereum is account based. So it's important to have both because there are pros and cons in both.
Yeah, and I know Cardano's, I think the foundation have been pretty active in getting some grassroots things going in places like Africa, you see, and whatnot. So at the end of the day, if we're getting more people into crypto and financial inclusion, that's what all the different blockchains and original cypherpunk philosophy was all about. So moving on to Bitcoin DeFi, that's been something that we've been having a number of good projects on recently. We first spoke about this 2 years ago now in terms of, hey, this is probably going to be one of the biggest themes of this cycle and nobody was talking about. So it's been a bit of an explosion there. Some technical upgrades that have allowed for that to happen with Taproot and whatnot. But now we see just dozens of layer twos and all the first dexes and lending and staking protocols starting to pop up. So from your point of view, what have you noticed? What are you seeing? What are you really liking about it? And how do you guys fit into everything that's happening in Bitcoin DeFi?
Yes, so yeah, there is definitely a very strong activity on Bitcoin because first of all, is the main chain, right? Anything, everybody that thinks about crypto thinks about Bitcoin, and it should be like this. Bitcoin is the index of every crypto ecosystem, right? If Bitcoin goes down, everything follows normally because it's representing the whole crypto industry, and it's been always also the first. But it was not made for DeFi, for projects that goes above simple peer-to-peer payments, right? And now with the recent changes or updates of the blockchain of Bitcoin, we actually were able to start creating some hacks, like it's not like a full support of smart contracts, but we were several teams like us, we were able to actually start creating logic for smart contract functionality, right, more or less. And most of the projects that came out before us were very successful, of course, because there is demand actually. But most of them use some sort of compromise with a centralized party. So the centralized party has limited power, but it still has power. So if the problem is not that the central party is a bad guy, but the central party could get compromised and bad guys could use it. So that's the problem. That's why DeFi has been created, to not have parties that decide the fate of the financial decisions, right? And but there are people in the meanwhile has started using lending protocols and what's not, right? Magic Eden for the runes now and stuff like this. When we arrived in February, we saw the situation and we say, oh, but most of them are compromises with central parties, and it's handy, but it's not ideal because it's not marrying the Bitcoin philosophy of ownership and independence about your financial assets. And so we started creating in February the lending protocol that now supports Ordinals, and next week will support runes as well, and it's fully permissionless. So there is a communication between the parties, so the lender and the borrower, where we cannot do anything. We just limit ourselves to forward the messages that are already signed, so we cannot really change them. And even if we go offline, people still can choose other channels of communication to create the lending and the borrowing. So this is our contribution to actually have services that are decentralized, so permissionless. And from there, we do some brainstorming. We say, oh, we can also do a DEX for the rooms. And this is where the work of the DEX that was released a few days ago has actually happened.
Fantastic. So we've spoken about how it's really early days, and you've spoken even just next week adding more functionality and whatnot. So what happens next for you? Maybe midterm, this cycle, and then super long term. Are you seeing all sorts of NFTs or tokens, whatever we want to call them, just the ownership rights coming to Bitcoin? Do you think a lot of it goes to layer twos, just like we've seen with Ethereum? And where do you see all that going?
Well, there are several directions where the future is going, and they are all very interesting. Some they can be also dangerous. Don't address them correctly, but normally in the blockchain world, we address them correctly. And Bitcoin is moving behind all the DeFi of other chains, right? So it's basically took the best lessons from the other ecosystem, like Ethereum, for example, and now is starting to develop there. So we know that to keep a strong level of decentralization, there is a limit in the speed, for example, the scalability of a blockchain, because there are many nodes and the communication must be coordinated. And even with the best algorithm, we cannot really be super fast, right? And also not even super cheap, because if you're not super fast, there is more, war about transactions, who is getting on the chain first, and therefore the fees will raise automatically. What we can do is, one, there is a side of people that is full Bitcoin layer one, right? They don't believe in anything else than Bitcoin itself, which is totally fair, because the layer one is the one that represents the actual philosophy of decentralization and safety. And this is why we build the DEX and the lending protocol on the layer one, and then soon other products, because these people that don't want to move outside the layer one must have what they need on this layer, right?
Yeah.
But for a lot of use cases like trading and etc., NFT drops or whatever you like, you need a high level of scalability. The blockchain shouldn't be congested because you're releasing a new NFT collection or something like this.
Yeah.
And also you cannot do daily trading if you're paying $70 for a fee on Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And you do like 30 trades every 10 minutes or something.
Yeah.
So you need a scalable solution, right? And this is why now the layer twos on Bitcoin are popping out like mushrooms, because it's an actual demand and the only solution we have at this moment. Because if you don't want to compromise the decentralization level of Bitcoin, you need some additional layer on top that are a little bit less decentralized, but faster and cheaper, of course.
Yeah.
And most of them that we've seen so far are EVM environments that are just moved from the EVM world into a layer two on Bitcoin. So they basically take the stack of technology of EVM and they move it to Bitcoin on top of Bitcoin. What we are building instead is Photon, which is the first UTXO based layer two on Bitcoin, which is has some advantages, because first of all, it's the same architecture of Bitcoin layer one. So you have a direct correspondence between the UTXO you have on the layer one and the UTXO you have on the layer two. Second is more similar to the philosophy of Bitcoin, because the tokens points to your wallet, that they are not in a smart contract like RC20 on Ethereum.
Yeah.
So you actually, as you have Bitcoins on the main layer, you can have Bitcoins and runes and whatever token on the layer two, and nobody can hack a smart contract and steal it. So it's actually residing in pointing to your wallet as a UTXO. And third, there is a big advantage in ZK, zero knowledge proof creation, because when we want to prove something on UTXO model, you can just select the UTXOs that you want to spend, so the inputs you want to spend, and create a proof for that, instead of having to create the proof of the whole global state as EVM. So it creates cheaper and faster proofs that can be proven on the layer two of Photon.
So Photon sounds fascinating. That's not one that I had time to do any pre-research on. I was all concentrating on FluidTokens. But what stage is Photon at? Have you guys raising? Have you got a test net, or what stage are you at with all that?
Yes, Photon, we've been building for quite a while now. We announced it publicly 2 weeks ago in Lisbon at the NFC Ordinals conference. We won the pitch competition that was there. We presented on the main stage there as well, and we opened the first round for investment in the in that event. So we opened 2 weeks ago, and we are now discussing for getting the liquidity to actually build faster. What we trying to do is to basically deliver by September, October, the public testnet, for the first milestones, let's say, of the roadmap, and then go in mainnet hopefully in January 2025. So it's not far.
Yeah.
And it's not far because the whole team that is building Photon is super experienced in UTXO architectures. We come from several years. Everybody is senior in the UTXO world, so we know how things are done, things are managed, how to manage the UTXO, how to select them, etc., etc.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll definitely keep in touch with that one, and might have you have on again in future as that goes live. But is there anything else you wanted to touch on about Fluid Tokens or Photon that we've missed? And then we'll get into some maybe Bitcoin philosophy.
Okay, just some info very quick, like FluidTokens, we released the DEX last week and is being used by users already. There is documentation, is open source, etc. And it's an order book DEX, so there is no liquidity pools, tokens, etc. But there are actual limit orders and that match with market orders. There is a partial fills, so you don't have to buy the whole order that is staying there, and it's quite dynamic, so it's very interesting. I suggest that if anybody wants to buy or sell rooms, you should check it because it's worth it, and also check the documentation so they can see that how it works, why it works so well in a decentralized way. And in Photon instead, just the idea is that we are building this layer in the safest ways as possible. Of course, the difficult limit is always the bridge between layer 1 and layer 2, but this is an issue of every layer 2 that is being built on Bitcoin. And the problem is that Bitcoin layer 1 doesn't have the scripting power to actually create, for example, the covenants that a lot of people are waiting to actually have create proofs of validity between one layer and the second one, right? Yeah. So we are basically investigating and building different solutions. There is one that is very interesting and is about the decentralized oracle about the validity of the other layer that is allowed to basically prove that the Bitcoin side is fine and not compromised. Yeah. But there are different issues. We will take for sure the solution that is the best for the user, so the safest one first of all, and the one that scales well as a second priority, right? Yeah. And on the Photon layer, there will be several features that are super important, like programmability on the tokens, for example, to support any stable coins, major stable coins that a lot of people need. And the whole Photon layer is basically secured by the liquid staking mechanism, where people will stake Bitcoin. So basically, what we do is securing the layer using Bitcoin itself, and not another, token that is staked and is out of nothing. But it's actually people that bridge their BTC and stake it or delegate to a validator, so they just don't have to run a node, but they can just delegate to somebody else that does, and the whole network will be secured by BTC itself.
Yeah, fantastic, and that's a great segue into. I've been asking all our guests about where they think Bitcoin is going in the future, and just sharing some of my thoughts to see what they think about this as well. And I think this is the first cycle where it's been a clear path to Bitcoin becoming a global reserve currency or measuring stick, or really making governments accountable. And price-wise for Bitcoin, we're going to have all the Bitcoin locked up in layer 2s, like you said, in staking, in DeFi, but particularly borrowing against for stable coins. I think that's going to be an absolutely huge driver. And then you've got a lot of Bitcoin that's getting locked up by these ETFs, and more mature investors rebalancing, I think, can sort of smooth out this cycle. And so it's a little bit like the stock market and property, where I think Bitcoin's getting to this point now where we're probably not going to have 70 or 80% corrections. It's probably just going to have this growth in line with global liquidity and money printing and inflation. So that's kind of my bull thesis on why this can be a super cycle. Do you agree with all those points? Do you have anything different? Yeah, I'd love to get your perspectives.
I don't know where the price of Bitcoin is going. I think that no, I don't think. I see that most of the world now is going to accept the idea of Bitcoin. We had a big resistance in the past, but now more and more institutions and even countries are, and even presidents are
Yeah.
accepting Bitcoin as an idea of assets that has intrinsic value, and that so it can be used as a movement of value and capital in general. The ATF is a way that the traditional finance is using to slowly digest the idea of BTC, right? It has pros and cons, because the stronger is the ETF, the more control the traditional finance has on Bitcoin, for example, indirectly at least. But it's like this. But at the same time, it's a good way to allow some kind of players, big players, to actually invest in it, because because of laws, there are a lot of institutions that cannot really buy Bitcoin directly, but they can buy ETFs.
Yeah.
So that's a good access for old traditional institutions that are a little bit limited in investments choices, but now they can invest. And now we're waiting for other ETFs on less important blockchains, right, as well. Yeah. So I'm curious to see where this goes. And yes, so what we need to tackle is this scalability issue of Bitcoin, because at the moment, every time something happens, Bitcoin becomes a little bit unusable for most of the time. We could use Lightning Network or other solutions, but we're really talking about even Lightning Network that is not a layer 2 is still a layer where there is a less degree of decentralization, because there are relayers and stuff. Not saying that it's not safe to use. I'm just saying that the layer 1 is the safest one, right?
Yeah.
And so definitely we're going in that direction. I also see a sort of convergence from other blockchains into Bitcoin again, because Bitcoin stayed there on his own for a while, not supporting DeFi, not supporting NFTs and stuff. But now, basically, what we are saying is, Bitcoin is trying to do the same things now. That we saw that on the other blockchain they work. So now we are basically slowly accepting the change here in the best possible way. So to also make happy people that just want payments peer-to-peer. Yeah. And so I see other blockchains slowly converging into the main one. And so not moving the liquidity from those blockchain into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin already has enough liquidity, but it's more like the technological interoperability. So trying to create those, I say bridges in a very wide term, between Bitcoin itself and the actual other blockchains, like even Ethereum, Cardano, whatever. Yeah. So I see strong composability, and probably a future where the communication between blockchain can be even hidden to the user. So the average user that just have to do some payments or micro payments or something like this won't necessarily have to manage the blockchain side, because that's technology and not everybody wants to know about it.
Yeah.
So I see this user experience that becomes better and better, and also safer slowly. So definitely there are good progresses there.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put all the links to follow everything we've mentioned down below in the description, as always, guys. But thoroughly enjoyed this chat, Matteo. Any final thoughts for everyone at home?
I say just follow us, guys, on the news about Photon itself, because many are coming, and also about FluidTokens. Give us feedbacks, because we always, in 2 years since the bear market, we just improved, and we are where we are now only thanks to the community that use the products, use the DeFi services, and tell us, you could do this, or this is not nice, or the UX here is not easy, or something like this. And we are immediately there to fix them, to improve them, to iterate on the on all the services we made. So the DEX in this case on Bitcoin, the lending protocol on Bitcoin, etc.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Matteo. We'll have to catch up again in future, but all the best with everything as you build out Bitcoin DeFi. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alex. See you soon.